June 12th, 1994, Brentwood, California. Ron, age 25, single, no children, suffered multiple sharp force stab wounds to his neck, chest, head, abdomen, thigh, face, and hands. He suffered multiple blunt force injuries to his upper extremities. He ultimately died from forced fatal stab wounds to his jugular vein, lung, and aorta. Nicole, age 35, divorced, mother of two, suffered multiple sharp force stab wounds to her neck and head. She suffered multiple injuries to her hands and fingers. She ultimately died from a deep, incised, fatal cut to her throat, lacerations to left and right arteries, and left and right jugular veins. October 3rd, 1995, Los Angeles, California. Orenthal James Simpson was found not guilty of the crime of murder. Last Thursday, April 11th, 2024, I saw a breaking news article that said O.J. Simpson had died the previous day. So of course, the first thing I did was I ordered the book if I did it. I've watched a lot of true crime. It's always the spouse. I kept meaning to read this book ever since it was published in 2007, but I never got around to it. This edition has a brand new introduction exclusively for this paperback edition by the Goldman family. In the introduction by the Goldman family, you can feel the pain and the loss and the sadness and the frustration that the Goldmans had as they tried to collect the judgment that was awarded to them in the civil trial. The Goldmans fought and continued to fight to get OJ to pay the judgment that was owed to them. He vowed to never pay them. People often wondered why the Goldmans didn't just move on, and there's a line in the introduction that broke my heart when I read it. Closure does not exist in a victim/survivor's vocabulary. I understand that line more than many people might think. I heard somewhere that grief is a hole that never closes, but time can hopefully make that hole a little smaller so you don't fall in it every time you turn around. The Goldmans will never truly have justice, especially now that he's dead. He'll never pay for the crimes that everyone believes that he committed. The Goldman section of this book details what they went through to try and get the judgment paid to them. They didn't really have a choice. It was either to fight or to give up, and they couldn't give up. So this book was their one way to get him to pay. I learned a lot about the civil trial from the Goldman section of this book. Apparently, News Corp, the parent company of HarperCollins, tried to pay off the Goldmans when there was a massive backlash when OJ wanted to originally publish this book, and they didn't accept the payoff. And I have a massive amount of respect for the Goldmans for not accepting that money. On July 31st, 2007, federal court judge A.J. Crystal awarded the Goldman family the rights to If I Did It. Then he ordered them to publish it. Thus began one of the strangest odysseys in publishing history. The book, called One of the Most Chilling Things I Have Ever Read by Barbara Walters, skyrocketed up bestseller lists across the country in fall 2007 as the national media relentlessly covered O.J. Simpson's most recent indictment. This new edition includes brand new essays by the Goldmans and Goldman family lawyer Peter Haven that reveal the fascinating story behind the bankruptcy case, the book's publication, and Simpson's dramatic arrest in September 2007. So the Goldmans were ordered to publish this book in order to try and gain some of the money that was awarded to them from the civil trial. They needed to reconcile in their own minds and hearts how they could justify publishing this book when they had been so against it previously. And I think two things can be true at once. They can be disgusted that OJ even wrote this in the first place and still feel justified in publishing it so everybody can see exactly what he wrote. The Goldmans discussed different interviews that they did while they were promoting this book. And one of them was Oprah. And it surprised me to find out that Oprah refused to read the book. She refused to read it and she refused to endorse it. How do you do an interview about a book that you haven't read? The Goldman said that the vibe at the Oprah Winfrey show was very hostile. They also did an interview with Dr. Phil, and they said Dr. Phil's copy of the book was highlighted and marked up, and there were note cards stuck in it and post-it notes. So he read the book cover to cover and analyzed everything in the book. And I don't know about you, but I would rather do an interview with someone who has read my book. There's also a prologue written by OJ's ghostwriter, and one line really sticks out to me. When the publisher approached the ghostwriter about this project, she said, "He wants to confess, and I'm being assured it's a confession, but this is the only way he'll do it." I don't know if it's a confession or not, but the section that OJ wrote is weird. The problem is OJ intentionally left some mistakes in his section of the book and didn't correct the ghostwriter. And according to the ghostwriter, he says, "I purposefully didn't correct some of the mistakes because if the time comes that I have to defend myself, I can say, hey, look, it can't be me because that couldn't have happened." So OJ intentionally left some mistakes in there so he could throw the ghostwriter under the bus if he had to. In the ghostwriter's prologue, he talks about interviewing OJ, and he said, "He told me that he had only struck Nicole once in all the years they were together. Once. And the press had turned him into the poster boy for wife abuse. And none of the problems were his fault. It was all her. Everything." The term malignant narcissism popped into my head. That's exactly what narcissists do. Nothing's ever their fault. And if it is, they had a good reason for it. They try and justify everything. They're always the victim. OJ's section of the book is written just like you would think any abusive, narcissistic person would write their side of the story. Every conversation that he discusses is twisted, so he looks like the good guy. There's no doubt in my mind that these conversations he writes about happened, but he flipped who said what. It seems to me the only thing that he couldn't twist were the 911 phone calls and the police interrogation transcript. The first 5 chapters of OJ's section talk about his relationship with Nicole, how they met, them dating, them getting married. And he talks about one incident where he hit her car with a baseball bat and she called the cops. And he said that was the only incident. That was the only time he got arrested in 1989 for domestic violence. He had to do community service. He was violent with her before they even got married. He said they argued about getting married. There was another time after they got divorced that OJ went to her house to see what she was up to, and he saw her through the window of her condo, and he saw her with somebody else. I think his name was Keith. And to mess with her, he knocked on the front door and then left, just to mess with her. Who does that? There was a point in time where they were trying to get back together, I guess, but he said he didn't want her to move back in the house, and he made her buy a condo. So this conversation to me just seems weird. "I can't believe you made me buy my own place," she whined. "Nicole, we've been through this. Give it time." "I'm just saying." "I know, you've been saying for a while." "Well, it makes me wonder," she said. "I'm trying to be hopeful, but you're making it really hard. It's January. We've got 4 months before Mother's Day. On Mother's Day, it will be exactly 1 year. "I know," she snapped. "Stop reminding me. I feel like I'm on trial here." They gave it a year to work on things to see if they could make it work, and Mother's Day was that year. But this conversation just seems weird, and it doesn't make sense that he would make her buy her own place if he was hoping that they would get back together. Obviously, she wanted to buy her own place. The conversations just seemed weird. Either he flipped who said what, or he left out a lot of stuff. But there's no way he was the perfect angel in all of these conversations. Has anybody ever read that children's book that was a retelling of the Three Little Pigs, but it was told from the wolf's point of view? I'll put a picture of that book up there. The wolf went to the Three Little Pigs' house because he needed a cup of sugar. So all the interactions were kind of twisted, like, it's not my fault the house blew down. I had a sniffle and I sneezed. It was an accident. That reminds me of how OJ's section of this book was written. All of the conversations just seemed twisted. So he sounded like the good guy, and everybody else, Nicole mainly, was irrational or violent. And I don't know what their relationship was like. Maybe they were both toxic to each other. They obviously were not good for each other. It sickened me the way he twisted everything. It sickened me the way he spoke about Nicole. He had no respect for her. Chapter 6 is the weirdest chapter. It's the night in question. In chapter 6, he talks about what led him to go to Nicole's house that night. And he said a friend, Charlie, came over and told him some things about Nicole, which made him angry. He says, "We're going to scare the crap out of that girl." He doesn't say crap, but I don't want to swear on my channel. In chapter 6, before he goes to Nicole's house, he puts a line in there that is really weird to me. He says, "Now picture this and keep in mind this is hypothetical." That's the only time in this book he says that. So it makes it seem like he's just trying to cover all his bases. I don't think there was a Charlie. I don't think anyone came over that night. Another weird thing about this chapter is he yada yadas through the entire murder. I didn't expect him to go into detail about what happened, but he goes from arguing with Ron and Nicole and swearing at them to then something went horribly wrong and I know what happened, but I can't tell you exactly how. He was standing in Nicole's courtyard with a knife in his hand, covered in blood. Maybe he did black out. That happens. It's possible that he blacked out and he really doesn't remember what happened. But just because he doesn't remember it doesn't mean it didn't happen. He says, "It was like a part of my life was missing, like there was some weird gap in my existence." Maybe he just snapped and his mind blanked it out. He tried to convince himself he imagined the whole thing. And he went back to his house and took a shower and got in a limo and went to Chicago. One thing that really annoyed me about OJ's section of this book is he said, "To be honest, I'll be honest with you," and frankly, so many times in his chapters. People who are being honest don't feel the need to say, "to be honest with you." If everything happened exactly how he said in this chapter, he had plenty of time to do it. The next chapter is his police interrogation. He couldn't spin that, so it's mostly the transcript. And then chapter 8 was all about the famous car chase in the white Bronco. He said he wanted to go to Nicole's house to just see the house, but there were cops there. He wanted to go see her grave because he didn't remember the funeral because he was too drugged up on antidepressants and sleeping pills. And OJ's section of the book ends after he gets back to his house after that car chase. And that's it. I guess we all know what happens after that. He was ultimately acquitted. And because of double jeopardy laws, he couldn't be tried again, even if this is a confession. But he put this as hypothetical in there to cover his bases. Then there's an afterword by Dominic Dunn, who sat in the trial to report on it, I believe. He got a seat assigned to him by the judge, so he was able to be in there every single day. And he spent a lot of time next to the Goldman family. Then there's a section written by Peter Haven, Esquire, who is a lawyer, and he spoke to the woman who was fired from HarperCollins because of the original publication of this book. According to this section of the book, she said that this book is not hypothetical. I believed he was guilty then, and I still believe that he was guilty. If you want to make up your own mind, read it. I'm going to link the Ron Goldman Foundation for Justice in the description box. Closure does not exist in a victim/survivor's vocabulary. I understand what they mean by that. I have things in my past that there's not closure for. People always tell you you should forgive and forget. That's not how things work sometimes. This book was hard to read, and it brought up a lot of memories from my first marriage. Narcissists will always blame the other person.